All right. All right. So it sounds like we got voice on here now. If that's not the case, let me know. Can you hear them? Just me. Why? I know why.
I
But
love London.
Yeah,
he's
it should
already
be
had a
good now,
man.
right?
I did. Typically do.
Yeah, it's a little late there, isn't it?
It's 10 past 1.
All right. For some reason, my freaking
Oh man,
audio settings got
Grant, where are
reset.
you at?
I'm out of San Diego, California.
Oh, awesome. Been down there many times too.
All
Pale
right.
Horse, where are you out of?
Out of Chattanooga, Tennessee, Sluggo.
Awesome. Foster, where are you out
I'm up in Connecticut.
of? Thumper, where are you at? Nighthawk 407, where are you at?
I'm also in Texas
Excellent.
and have a son in Alaska. So yeah, it was colder here than there.
Yeah. Fajita, where are you at?
I'm out of St. Pete Beach, Florida.
Excellent. Excellent.
All right, gentlemen. Comms are back up on the stream, so we're good to go there. Introduce you to Mark Sluggo Hasara. He's a tanker guy, so he's got a lot of knowledge in that aspect. I know I've talked with some of our mission dev guys there. They've been chopping at the bit to ask him some questions and get some knowledge from him. So I'll turn it over to Sluggo. I think you've already started with the introductions pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
Just I guess give everybody a brief synopsis of what your Air Force career was all about, and we can open up to questions, or you can just keep on talking, or
Okay.
whatever. I think we're shooting for at least an hour. I know some of these guys probably want to go fly, but
Sure.
I can go.
Sure.
I personally can go as long as you want. So.
I'll go as long as you guys want, particularly for you, Bloat. I mean, it's early in the morning there, so I'm going to bow to your wishes, whatever those might be. Okay, brother, because you're in London.
I'm all good, sir. I'm all good. I'm kind of used to it now.
Gentlemen, it's truly an honor for me to be with you guys, and I appreciate Creighton taking the and Creighton putting this all together. And I will tell all of you the same thing I tell all my wife's friends. I pass gas for a living. Okay, and it's but it's an amazing amount of gas. And Creighton was telling me the other night that you can only have like one tanker. I was the chief of the air refueling control team for the invasion of Iraq. I was the COO, so to speak, of all air refueling operations over Iraq during the 2003 invasion. In the 26 days of the invasion, the air campaign we all know as shock and awe, we transferred 417,133,000 pounds of jet fuel out of tankers into other airplanes. Now, that's a massive number, and a lot of people have asked me, Sluggo, how do you get your head around that? Here's how. A major from the Pentagon kept bugging me one night, because his general wanted to know how much gas, and I told him, your general's not my general. I hung up on him twice. Okay, I just didn't have time to talk to him. 417,133,000 pounds of gas will allow a Ford F-150 truck to make 2,685 round trips to the moon, or 7 round trips to the sun. That's how much I managed in 26 days. We ran the United Arab Emirates out of gas. They were not capable of making the amount of gas we were using with the 20 KC-10s and other airplanes that were on the ramp at Al Dhafra. We had to bring in a very large super tanker filled with JP5, and we were pumping it straight to Al Dhafra and then straight into the airplanes, and off they'd go. So I have a lot of experience in tankers. I'm a veteran of 4 different wars: Desert Storm, Kosovo, Afghanistan, and Iraq. I created and was the deputy commander of the KC-135 Weapons School that is now part of the Nellis Weapons School, the 509th Weapons Squadron as it's called. Gentlemen, worst 4 years of my career. Nobody wanted us. We were like the redheaded stepchild that, anytime we came into a room, we were told leave. But it's been going for over 20 years now. We've got over 200 graduates, so it's doing well. I also was a curriculum director at the Joint Forces Staff College, teaching U.S. and international partners how to plan campaigns, not just air campaigns, although that was my focus because of my background, but also the ground campaign, the surface campaign, both land and sea, and how to prepare for it for 3 years. So I've got a lot of teaching experience as well as operational experience. I have 10 cats and traps on 8 aircraft carriers, not in the KC-135, but in the back of the COD, and I've got S3 time. And even got to drive the USS John F. Kennedy while it was underway refueling, okay? Funny story about that in my book. Those of you that don't know, I've written a book, came out in 2017, called Tanker Pilot, Lessons from the Cockpit. I had my camera with me everywhere I went, so there's 32 really good pictures that are, taken out my cockpit window during missions that I flew and so forth. There's 22 chapters, and a lot of the pictures go along with the different chapters that I wrote. So that's my background. I have spent a lot of time when I was at the weapons school and at the Joint Forces Staff College creating scenarios based on real world events that have either happened or were some part of a war plan that we were hoping would happen the way we wanted it to. Now, the great Prussian General Helmuth von Moltke has said, "No plan survives its first contact in combat." That is in fact true. None of the 4 wars that I've been involved with ever went the way we wanted it to. It's just the way it is. So because of the experience that I've had in all of these different wars and contingencies and so forth, I was able, when I got to the Joint Forces Staff College, update the curriculum using real world events that I had been involved with, or what we call contingency plans or war order plans that helped all these planners get ready for it. So tonight, what I want to do is just spend a few minutes with you talking about how do you create a scenario? How do you create a realistic scenario that everybody can get something out of, okay? The first thing that you have to do when you're creating a scenario is, what are your training objectives? Now, all of you fly sims, all of you, and fly them very well. I've seen some of Creighton's video and so forth. But the reason that you create these scenarios is to train from. Some of you may want more air-to-air skills. Some of you may want more air-to-ground skills. Some of you may want more joint skills where you're working with F-35s from another nation, or like in our case, working with the British in their Tonkas. Okay. By the way, Bloat, I love tornadoes. Love tornadoes. Beautiful airplane.
It's not a point of honor for me because I am actually Polish, but I live here. I've lived here for 15 years. And they are awesome.
Yeah, it was just a cool looking airplane. Okay, and I appreciate the Polish Air Force, because now they're flying F-16s, and that came about in part because of their great support for us in the global war on terrorism. And I'll tell you something, Bloat, that's really funny. We had two B-52s that actually left England and flew, actually there was three of them, on their way to Iraq, flew through Poland. And what was fascinating was a lot of the radars and SAM sites that we would have thought, 10, 20 years before were adversary SAM sites, were lighting them up as they were flying through. They said it was pretty interesting, to go through, the former Warsaw Pact countries and experience that and to see that. So the Polish government has been a great counterpart for us, and love seeing your F-16s, because you got really good ones, man. You got the new motors and everything on them.
And I think we have the conformal tanks as well now.
Yes,
so
you do.
We don't need
Yeah,
you
you
as
do.
many
Yeah,
times
I
per
know.
mission.
I know that. But, so always when you're building your scenarios, number one, start with some kind of training objectives. Right? All of you are trying to improve your skills in certain arenas. Think about, what skill set do I need? What skill set am I lacking in? What am I really good in? But what could I use some more training in? Okay. And if you approach it from that standpoint, then you become much better at doing a lot of things, like the F-16. It can do air to air, it can do air to ground, it can do seed, suppression of enemy air defenses, destruction of enemy air defenses. It can do all of these different missions. Same thing like a strike eagle. We were using the F-22 in Syria in ways that it really wasn't designed for, and that was dropping bombs. That was an airplane that we were going to use to go in, kick down the door, take out the adversary Air Force. But when you have an airplane that can cruise at Mach speeds, carry precision guided weapons, and air to air, then you tend to get a few more missions. And maybe some of you use F-22 as your primary airplane. But think about scenarios from, what skills do I want? What are my objectives for training? And think about, I need some more air to ground techniques, more air to air techniques, seed techniques, those kinds of things. Okay. Because I'll tell you, the seed deed mission is probably one of the coolest missions there is in the world. All right. You're going to go in, all right, as a wild weasel. You aren't looking for a conflict. You are the conflict. You're going to go in and poke the other guy in the face by taking out his surface to air missile sites and his radars. And now you can do that in a number of ways. And just before we went into the 2003 Iraq War, the general who had created the integrated air defense takedown for Desert Storm came back to Shaw Air Force Base and told everybody how he did it. And his last couple slides were, now you have these new precision guided munitions, such as JDAM, and even newer ones now, small diameter bomb, harm ER, all these different things. The F-18G Growler has all kinds of electronic things that they do, both passive and active, to mess with the bad guy's radar. So those are all skill sets that, as a commander, I would want all of you guys to have in certain scenarios. And there's all kinds of historical basis for seed deed, air superiority, and so forth. And like I said, you can make some up. How many of you know that you can actually download a Google Earth overlay that has every SAM site in the world on the overlay? You're nodding your head. You know what I'm talking about. Okay?
Yeah, I've seen it. It's a huge mess, isn't it?
It's a big file, okay, but it's really cool, okay, when you go and look at some of the things, because it has North Korea, had Iran, has Iran, used to have Iraq, but and that's kind of my next point, is number two, go and look at some of these real world things that you can now download off the web. If you go to, I think the website's called Above Top Secret, they have this Google overlay. That's where I got mine. I don't know where you got yours, Bloke, but that's where I found mine. And it was a rather large file, okay? It took a while to download, okay, even with a good speed, good internet speed. But when I did it, I actually took one of the slides that I had made from it for a presentation I was giving at Rockwell Collins, and I took it to our weapons school, and I showed it to them. And I didn't have a security clearance at the time, but they're all out there like nodding their heads. They're like going, "Wow, Sluggo, that's like really damn close." Okay, so you can look at places like North Korea, look at places like China. If you want to know how paranoid the Russians really are, go look at the SAM ring around Moscow. There's literally about 20 SAM sites, operating SAM sites, and they're SA-20 gargoyles defending the town, the city of Moscow. And then you go to some of their other places, their big bases and so forth, you can see these things. So look at some historical precedences and scenarios. Like in Syria, Khmeimim Air Base has got flankers, it's got fencers, and it's got S-300s guarding the base. There's all kinds of scenarios that you can build there where you're trying to enforce a no-fly zone over Syria with Russian airplanes flying in the vicinity. And I'm sure most of you know there's like a red phone between our Air Operations Center at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar and theirs at Khmeimim, just in case something happens, all right? But some of these open sources will allow you to actually download a lot of really, really cool intelligence that you can build your scenarios from, particularly, like I say, this Google Map overlay. If you ever wanted to go bomb the two nuclear plants at Bashir, Iran, they're literally right on the coast, but they've got a Hawk battery and they've got a bunch of other things that are guarding them. And you can build your scenarios based on those kinds of things. And of course, they've got F-14s. They've got their version of an F-5. It's got two tails. It's kind of weird looking. But how many of you know that the Iranian F-14s were actually escorting the Russian bombers through Iran, through Iraq, and into Syria and dropping their bombs? How many of you knew that? I didn't know that until one day somebody showed me a picture of two F-14s hanging out on the wings of a Russian backfire. But those are some of the things that you can look at to help build your scenarios. And think about what you want to do, okay? Do I want to do like a kick in the door scenario, like an opening night, where I'm going to take out SAM sites, I'm going to take out an Air Force, I'm going to try and take out the Republican Guard. And from that type of scenario, you can kind of figure out, well, I'm going to drop bombs tonight, or I'm going to shoot harms tonight, do seed deed, or so forth. Another great scenario location right now is the South China Sea. The Chinese have created these artificial islands, and there are now guns, SAM sites, and you can actually go back and look at Google Earth and see that they've had flankers on a couple of the islands. Google Earth is also a great intelligence tool because you can take one of those, it's called Fiery Cross Reef. It's one of the bigger bases, Fiery Cross Reef in the South China Sea. And I was just sitting there going back through it, and it has a time period where you can go back like April of 2020, January of 2020, December 2019, and so forth. And in some cases, you can actually see what's on the ramp. And I just happened to find flankers sitting out on the ramp outside of their shelters. They were doing an engine run on one because it was on a trim pad. You know, that is also a very interesting place that you guys could create a scenario where you have ships shooting surface-to-air missiles. And go look up the capabilities of the Sovereign destroyer that the Russians had in their Navy that the Chinese have. I think there's 4 of them. We used to call it the Sov has many because it could do anti-submarine warfare, it could do surface warfare, and it could do air-to-air. And one of the really cool things about the Sovereign is it had a great radar system, and they could data link that picture, their radar picture, onto shore. So that's another area where I think you guys could create some really fascinating scenarios against some fairly lethal threats, such as their J-10, their J-20, the new fighters that the Chinese are flying. That would be something that I would look into. And we're flying a lot of missions there, and so are the Australians. We fly a lot of bomber missions through there. We have reconnaissance missions that are going through there. And maybe that's what you do, is just a show of force escort. And, you know, you fly around and the Chinese are like, we're going to shoot you with our SAMs, or they have a Sovereign on the surface or something like that. Those are kind of the scenarios you could kind of look at. So that second point is take a look at some of the things that are happening around the world today that you can create some of these training scenarios out of for air to surface, air to air, or otherwise. Third thing I would tell you guys is one of the toughest missions we do in an air campaign is rescue. Having somebody get shot down and then literally stopping the entire air campaign to go find that man or woman that is now on the ground as an evader. We call it rescue combat air patrol, or rest capping. That's a scenario
Thanks for the follow.
We did not spend a whole lot of time on. But when I got to the weapons school, they had a whole scenario, downed airman scenario, that was just fascinating to watch. Because what would happen is they would say over the radio, okay, Frosty 1-2, an F-16 that was on a seed mission just got hit by a SA-20 and is now on the ground evading. And they just blurt that out. And then all of a sudden, part of the package now has to go figure out how to find the guy, how to establish communications with him, find his location, but still run the air campaign. And now we have to
I'm not
take
worried
a
about it.
portion
Look,
of our forces,
appreciate it though.
both air to air, air to ground, sea deed, to establish a perimeter over the top of the guy or gal, and then escort the A-10s in. And then the A-10s escort the helicopters And let me remind you that those helicopters and A-10s are slow, very slow. Okay, and so here you are, you're trying to figure out where is the survivor's location before you even bring the A-10s and the helos in. And that may require you taking out a radar site or taking out a bunch of trucks that have soldiers in it that are going to the location of where you think the survivor may have gone down. You've got AWACS doing the command and control, all those kinds of things. That is a very tough mission and scenario that a lot of people don't fool around with and don't like doing. A, because it's so hard. It's such a hard nut to crack. And B, because a part of your force is now doing nothing but trying to find the survivor, pick up the survivor, escort the A-10s, the helicopters, clear out all the ground defenses, air defenses, and so forth. You might want to think about doing a rescue, combat air patrol or RESCAT, particularly over water, like in the South China Sea. That would be a really, really challenging one. Fourth thing I could think of is we will never go to war without coalition partners. We can no longer afford, particularly the United States, to go do it alone. We don't have the forces to do it anymore. And in a lot of cases, we don't have the expertise. In the South China Sea, the Australians live down there. They're the experts. But they fly, Super Hornets. They fly F-35s now. Used to fly, they call them pigs. We call them F-111s. But all of these different coalition partners now fly different types of airplanes. Fun flying an F-35, fun flying an F-22. But Saudis fly F-15Es. Singapore flies F-15Es. So in some of your scenarios, think about including allies and their air forces. What are the capabilities and limitations of their airplanes? Because if we ever go to war with the Indians and the Indian Air Force, we got to deal with flankers, MiG-29s, and MiG-21s. Do you understand the clear field of fire that presents the problem? Because now you're out fighting with airplanes that normally are flown by your adversary. Make sure everybody's squawking the right IFF squawks, man. But those are some of the things I think you guys can include in your scenarios is, change up the airplanes every once in a while and include flying in some of the coalition partners' airplanes. We did a whole Navy scenario, actually did an actual naval event with the French carrier Charles de Gaulle. And on board the carrier, they had the French Super Intendard. It is a pig. We had to gas that sucker up about every 20 minutes. It was carrying 2 500-pound GBU-12 laser-guided bombs. But you can't imagine how excited the French Navy was when they got to drop bombs on Taliban and Al-Qaeda targets in Afghanistan. I still have the little gold tie tack and the sterling silver ashtray that the 3-star general that was at the Combined Air Operations Center in Prince Sultan gave me because of all the gas we gave them so that they could drop bombs in Afghanistan. So sometimes the coalition airplanes you're playing with aren't quite as capable as your 5th generation airplane. Sometimes you're dealing with 4th, maybe even 3rd generation airplanes. So include those in your scenarios too, because there's some really odd things that you'll have to do Oh, and the French had a really, really tight rules of engagement. There's a really funny story I put in my book about this too. The Intendard pilot asked for the code word, the French code word, to drop his bombs, and the Navy captain, F-18 guy that was sitting as the warlord that day, didn't know what it was, didn't know what the code word was, and he blurted out like fried chicken or something like that. And of course, the Intendard guy comes back and goes, "Excuse me, sir, that is not the right code word." Okay, and so they had to scramble and find the French three-star to get the right code word. And sometimes that's something you can include too when you're doing your scenarios. Is certain countries have more restrictive rules of engagement than, say, the U.S. or the British or the French do, and that becomes a real problem. That becomes a real issue sometimes, where like leadership targets is a really big one, where, as you know, the Americans, we don't have any qualms about going after people like Saddam Hussein, the head of a country. But some of our coalition partners did. And they were part of the coalition, and we had to work around them. So those are like the four things that I could think of right off the top of my head to give you guys some ideas when you're creating your scenarios for your war game and your flying, that I think you can use to create realistic scenarios, realistic training scenarios, particularly the rescue one. It's really tough because, I mean, think about it. You're in an F-16 flying over an A-10 that is loaded wall to wall with weapons, anti-personnel weapons, and the fastest he can go is about 210 knots, maybe 250. Okay. We refueled them at 210. If they're all loaded out, we had to actually put our flaps down so that we could stay in the air to slow down to 210. And the other problem we had is that the boom, when airspeed goes below 190 knots in the KC-135, you can't control the boom. So we were only 20 knots above the stall speed of the boom, which creates some issues. And the A-10s had to refuel between 8,000 and 12,000 feet, which put us in the heart of anti-aircraft guns. But I pity the poor gunner that opens up on a tanker that's refueling A-10s. That's a death wish, okay? That's an absolute death wish. Anyway, gentlemen, that's kind of my prepared remarks. Those are the things I was thinking about, with creating some of your scenarios as you guys go through doing all this, and think about some of the real world things that are going on around you that you can create scenarios like South China Sea, a rescue in the South China Sea, North Korea, Iran going after their nuclear sites and so forth. And I'll open it up for questions now. Anything. Not just on scenarios and wargaming, but, you guys ask me anything you want. And if I can answer it, I will. If I can't, I'll tell you.
So does the Air Force control all of the tankers for the entire U.S. military?
Yes, they do. We have the U.S. Air Force has the AMC, Air Mobility Command, has the KC-10s, the KC-46s, and the KC-135s. There are 2 units that are based overseas, one at Kadena in Okinawa, Japan. That's where I was for 5 years. Absolutely freaking loved it. It was the best flying assignment I had. Then the other one is at Mildenhall in England. So Air Forces Europe controls Mildenhall. PACAF controls the unit in Okinawa. And then all the other ones are controlled by Air Mobility Command out of Scott Air Force Base. But we will go and do a lot of exercises like in Australia or in Europe and so forth. And we'll have a number of tankers that'll come together, and someone will be designated the tanker king, as we call it. And sometimes that might be a British A330 guy instead of a KC-135 guy. Most of the time, they're going to pick one of our graduates out of our weapons school, though, because you have to understand what the weapons school is. When I was there, it was 482 academic hours, 18 5-hour flights, a 3-hour simulator, and a graduate level paper, and it's all done in 19 weeks. It's tough. It's a real time management problem. But you come away from that as the absolute expert in air refueling on a global scale. But I was never in a situation where the Americans weren't running the show as far as air refueling was concerned. And that was simply because we had so many of them. Like the war in Kosovo. There was 225 tankers and 175 of them belonged to the United States. So it was just a huge amount of air refueling, KC-10s and KC-135s. The Germans had theirs, the Dutch had their KDC-10s, the French had their tankers. And it was the same way over Afghanistan too. So it's a lot of freaking gas. Good question, though.
I got a question from one of the guys on my stream. He's asking if at low speeds, when you lose control of the boom, how does it affect the aerodynamics of the airplane?
You know what? The boom acts just like a rudder. And maybe some of you have seen this, maybe some of you haven't. But when air refueling training was taking place at Castle Air Force Base in Merced, California, we used to do a thing called the whiff, where the B-52 would actually take the boom and move it this way, and we'd actually go into 90 degrees of bank. And we would go like this, go down together, then come up the other side, and then the B-52 would move to the outside, and we'd go back down the other side, all right? And we did it simply to show that, A, the boom acts like a rudder, and B, your receiver, if he's big enough, can actually, he or she's big enough, can actually move the tanker around, all right? The C-5, the C-17 is the same way. When we moved to Altus, became part of Air Mobility Command, moved to Altus, they quit doing the whiff. Fortunately, I got to do it because it was still a SAC then. But so it still is a rudder, but you have to remember the boom has these little tiny rudder vaders that move it around, and below 190 knots, it gets mushy right around 200. And at 190, it literally just hangs there. And I have never been in a situation where we were that slow with the boom hanging, because we always tried to stay at least 20 knots above it. And we would tell the A-10s, you either got 210 or nothing. That's the slowest we can go and still keep the boom functioning too. And normally 210 was about where we would, the lowest we would go with the A-10s. The C-130s, we also refuel at 220 knots. The book speed for the A-10 and the C-130s is 220 knots. But because the A-10 would carry so much ordnance and they were so loaded out, with 1,030 rounds, I think, in the gun of 30 millimeter gun, plus bombs, plus a targeting pod, all those kinds of things. I mean, they were really loaded down. So 210 was the lowest we'd go. And even then, sometimes what we'd have to do is we'd do what's called a toboggan, where we go down together at a 300 foot per minute rate descent. We call it tobogganing. And that was the only way that the A-10s, when they were fully loaded, could stay on the boom. And we had to do it below 20,000 feet. And most of the mountains in Afghanistan were 15,000. and a few 19,000. So, yeah, we were actually like refueling only 1,000 feet above some of the mountains. But like I said, if you're stupid enough to shoot at a tanker with A-10s on the wings, then you're dumb enough to die. You're gonna get killed.
So what about fueling the Navy guys? You know, with a drogue shoot or something like that.
Great question, Wolf. So, we had for the longest time what we called the boom drogue adapter, and that was that big shuttlecock looking like thing that we put on the back of the plane. That thing is really heavy. It weighs 251 pounds, which is why they call it the Iron Maiden, Wolf. Okay, they call it the Iron Maiden, right? Or the wrecking ball, right? Because if you get slapped with that thing, it hurts, right? And they call it a basket slap, all right? Either the hose hits you or the drogue hits you. And if the drogue hits you, it takes the canopy off. And some of you may have seen the picture from Afghanistan of the F-18 missing his whole canopy. That happened on my watch. I was working that night when that happened. All right. And yeah, the AWACS calls back. We got an F-18 that's going to have to go into Abbottabad. He got hit by the basket and lost his canopy. And I went, oh crap, you know. And it was just because it was real turbulent that night. The guy made a stab at it, and as this probe went by it, it smacked the canopy real hard, and actually broke the canopy. You know, the plexiglass was just, you know, flying everywhere. And his after action report was really funny. He said he was sweating from the waist down and frozen from the waist up because he was in the cold cockpit. And it was like January or February over Afghanistan, so it was really cold. All right. But he went home with the basket on the probe, if I remember right. So, but typically we do the Navy Wolf 20,000 to 23,000. 275 knots is typical. We would slow down for the S3s, but now, you know, it's like an all Hornet deck now. We do the S3s like the A10s, like at 220, 230, because their engines just, you know, weren't quite as powerful. And they could, an S3 Viking actually takes off pretty heavy. I've got a cat shot in an S3, a fully loaded S3 with fuel, the buddy store, and a few other things, and it hurt. But we have now gone to wingtip pods on the KC-135s. Not all of them. They're only 33 pod sets, if I remember right. The KC-10 has, I think, 30 pod sets. They call them warp pods, wingtip air refueling pods. Ours are called Mippers pods. I'm sure they have them in your game. Creighton told me that they got them in your game.
Yeah, we have the game calls it the KC-135 MPRS for whatever reason. So that's the one with the pods and the boom. And we do have the one with just the boom, which is labeled as KC-135. And then we have the, I think, KC-130, obviously, with the pods.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And we do have a mod for KC-10, I believe. But that one comes with the pods as well, I think.
Yeah, and those were a game changer, too. The KC-10, and once we get the KC-46 fixed, will be the basically ultimate air refueling platform, because it has the boom, and we can pump about 6,000 pounds a minute through it. Has the air refueling pods, one on each wing. We can pump about 1,000 pounds per minute through those. That's our rule of thumb. But the other thing that is really critical that the KC-135 does not have the capability to do is be air refueled. Every KC-10, every KC-46 can be air refueled. And
you're refueling the tankers from other tankers.
That is correct, Wolf.
Wow.
That's correct. We're filling up the gas station from another gas station.
That's what the British did in the Falklands.
Yes.
They had a caravan of like 11 tankers, and they only had contingency, I think, for 2 having a malfunction, and they barely made it for the Vulcans to reach the islands.
They were called the Black Buck missions, and if you search for Black Buck missions, that air refueling thing actually comes up. It was incredible what they had to do with their Victor tankers and so forth to get those Vulcan bombers down there. I mean, it was incredible, and it was a really, really long flight for the Vulcans. Some of the Black Buck missions were dropping bombs. Two of them went down there with Shrikes to take out radars, and there was this really elaborate Victor tanker plan where the Victor tanker was being refueled by other Victor tankers at 1,000 pounds a minute too, because again, it's a drogue system. It's only a little hose. So it was taking a long time, and there was some fallouts. It's an amazing story when you read the Black Buck missions and the air refueling that had to go on there. I'm glad you brought that up, Bo, because it was an amazing feat of air refueling. I will say chaos and madness, because that's what it was.
It certainly was, okay. And the fueling equipment on those Vulcans was not in operation for 30 years at the time, so they refitted it before the mission. That was the only way they could do it. I posted a 10-minute video in the chat here.
Oh, good. I'm glad you put that up, because think about this, guys. You're going to go fly, what was it, a 12 to 14-hour mission, and you've never done refueling before on an airplane that was equipped with it at one time, but hadn't had any practice at all with it. And now you're doing it in combat for the first time. And like I said, it was an amazing feat that these guys pulled off. All right. And it kind of shows in a microcosmic way how we move our fighters from the States, like over to the Middle East. Typically, they do it behind a KC-10. The KC-10 is being refueled by KC-135s as it hops across the Atlantic and so forth. Typically, like say you're moving F-15Es out of Seymour Johnson. The KC-10s will come in there. They'll plan with the Strike Eagles. The Strike Eagles will take off. They'll do a lap around the pattern. KC-10s will take off. They'll join the KC-10s, and they'll fly in formation. They'll probably get refueled up in New England, probably up from tankers that are coming out of PEs or someplace like that. Then they'll go across, hit by some more tankers just prior to Keflavik, Iceland, maybe hit Mildenhall tankers after passing Keflavik, Iceland. They may land at Lakenheath and fly the rest of the way in to the Middle East the next day. But typically they do it on the KC-10 because you can put 75 passengers, their cargo, in other words, all their maintenance spare stuff, inside the KC-10, and you can continue filling up the KC-10 and topping it off so that it's always got more gas. Typically, the ARM model would give the KC-10s about 80,000 pounds each time we plugged into it. And on some of those missions, they actually flew during Desert Storm F-4G Wild Weasels that had flown from George to Seymour, because Seymour was still an F-4 base. They had 2 squadrons of Strike Eagles, 1 squadron of F-4s there. And they flew a 15-hour mission in an F-4G Wild Weasel behind KC-10s from Seymour Johnson to just outside the Strait of Gibraltar, where I think like 2 or 3 more KC-10s took off out of, what's the base in Spain? Morón, Spain. And they basically, the KC-10s peeled off and 3 more KC-10s showed up in front of them and kept them going. The squadron commander of that squadron is a very good friend of mine, and he said they weren't sure where they were going to land while they were going over there. They found out while they were in the air they're going to land in Bahrain. the Strike Eagles that went over for Desert Storm, same thing. They found out where they were going to land while they were in the air deploying to the Middle East. They were still trying to work all the diplomatic clearances, and they ended up going to Thumb Rate, Oman. And it is out in the middle of nowhere.
So
Thumb Rate is out in the middle of nowhere.
from
Go
a
ahead.
scenario standpoint,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, do the tankers have like a certain point where they just stop and turn around and then they fly back towards where they were
Yes.
coming from?
Yes.
And
So
they can pick up the combat aircraft on the way back?
sometimes, yeah. Typically, they'll deploy over behind a KC-10, and there will be Wolf KC-135s that are like along their route of flight, and it's just, you know, I just need an altitude, a time, and a location, you know, a lat long, and I'll hook up with you. And typically that's what we'll do, and we'll dump the KC-135s will dump the gas into the KC-10s, and they'll just keep moving, and then the KC-135s will land back at whatever base, you know, Keflavik, Mildenhall, Marone. What was the other one? There was one in the Med. Oh, Sigonella. Sigonella was the other one. If you want to get stuck somewhere, Sigonella is a great place to get stuck. Okay. All right.
Not 100% sure I want to ask why.
I will tell you why. Okay. Sicilian pizza is outstanding. The base at Sigonella is a wonderful base. It's it's pretty close to that. What's the name of the volcano that went off on Sicily? Not Vesuvius. That's the one up by, anyway. But it's got the most incredible, beautiful beaches not too far from the base. And the water.
Beaches or beaches?
Both. Okay. The water is just crystal clear down there. All right. And so, you know, guys would go down, they'd land there, you know, you wouldn't fly a mission for a day or two, and you'd go down and drink like Italian beer there on the beach, or you just go to the pizza places and pasta places, you know. But yeah, being stuck in Sigonella was, it's a hard job. Somebody's got to do it.
Nighthawk, your mic open.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got a question for you.
Sure, go ahead.
So typically, like for us in the game, you know, the tankers will typically go up and fly in orbit, and then it's just kind of whenever you need it, you go to the tanker.
Yeah.
Is that typically like in the early days of Desert Storm when there's tons of aircraft? Is that kind of how you guys operate, or would you have specific flight plans for each day?
Tex, that's a great question, and actually we do it both ways. So what we would do, Tex, is you'd have tankers that were assigned to specific air refueling missions. But for air refueling, you want effectiveness and efficiency. And never the twain will those two meet, okay? All right? You're either going to be really effective or really efficient. And I will take effectiveness over efficiency any day of the week. So what we did, Tex, is we would have, again, we would use KC-10s, and we would call them reliability tankers, where they would go up, they would orbit, they wouldn't have any planned receivers, but they would just be there in case something happened. Typically, like a rescue, okay? We would just take gas off of the reliability tankers, all right? Now, I will tell you, during the second Gulf War, the invasion, we didn't have that luxury because we didn't have enough tankers. What happened was we got about 180 Air Force tankers spread at 15 bases, and we were out of tankers. AMC actually ran out of tankers. This is a little known secret. Air Mobility Command actually ran out of tankers during the second Gulf War because the Homeland Security alert level went up in the States, thinking that there was going to may be some terrorist activity. That soaked up a lot of tankers. And at the same time, Kim Jong-il thought, hey, now's a good time to get kind of frosty over here in North Korea. And we had to send 25 tankers to Guam and to Okinawa because he was threatening to do some crazy things, and he was launching missiles out into the ocean. So we didn't have the luxury of having reliability tankers. And what would happen in that case, Tex, is we had Kim Campbell and the Kim Campbell gal flying a A-10. She actually made it home. We had an F-14 go down. I was actually in a tanker that night. So one time I flew during the war, and we have an F-14 go down. So we had to do a rest cap that night, and we actually had to strip off strike airplanes because we had to use their gas to find the two F-14 guys. That is not an effective way to do things. And if we'd have had reliability KC-10s techs, we could have taken care of that, but we just didn't have the tails. We didn't have the airplanes. But during Desert Storm, we deployed like almost 300 tankers. So we would put a reliability tanker in the west, in the center, and in the east. And a KC-10 takes off with 340,000 pounds of gas. It takes off with a buttload of gas, all right? And typically what we did, Texas, is they'd have 3-hour station times. So they'd be on station for 3 hours, and then we'd bring another one up, okay? Afghanistan, we used reliability KC-10s. And again, we used it because it was boom and drogue and air refuelable, right? They do not like getting more gas and having to stay up longer. We call it consolidating, all right? And we had, during Operation Anaconda, that all of you know went south quickly, went really bad. The Navy SEAL falls off the helicopter in the middle of the night. Neil Roberts, the Battle of Roberts Ridge. We actually drained 100,000 pounds out of a KC-10 in about 4 hours. 100,000 pounds of gas. And
worth it to save one dude.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. We didn't know Neil Roberts was dead at the time. Actually, the CIA guys did because they actually watched it on their Predator. But and Wolf, you're absolutely right. We will stop an air campaign to go pick somebody up, whether they're alive or dead. We will go. That's our one contract. And it doesn't matter if you're an air guy, a ground guy, Navy guy, doesn't matter. We will come find you. We will not leave anybody behind. You may be alive, you may be dead, but we will come bring you home no matter what. And I think many of you know that in that particular battle, the Battle of Roberts Ridge, Neil Roberts falls out of the back. They execute him. Razor 3 comes in with the Rangers. 3 of those guys are killed before they even get off the ramp, and they're all pinned down. I actually have the F-15E video from their targeting pod and their HUD heads-up display from Twister 5.2. The Wizzo sent it to me. It's 10 minutes long with all the audio. It's the most amazing thing you hear and listen to. You can hear the guys on the ground. You can actually see the F-15E coming in, strafing. And here's the thing about that. The F-15Es did not have close air support doctrine in any of their pubs. The first time that Panzer and Spliff, that's the 2 guys' call sign. The pilot was Panzer, Spliff was the backseater. The first time they'd ever fired the gun at a ground target in their lives, they were firing 100 meters from the good guys in an actual situation at an actual bad guys on top of a mountain. And the really cool thing, Wolf, is you can see in the video as the plane's coming down, you can see the downed Chinook in the video on top of the mountain. It's
Would
the
it be
most
possible
amazing.
for you to share that video?
I'd have to ask Spliff about that first, okay? It's the most amazing thing you've ever seen. It is incredible. I'd have to ask him first. He sent it to me, and I'd have to ask him. One of the things that I do, my side hustle, my side company, is I do vinyl airplanes for your walls that peel off and stick to your walls. All right, and we did an 8-foot graphic of his airplane that he was flying that day, and it's really a crazy story because he and his pilot and the other F-15E crew, all 4 of them win the Silver Star for their exploits on top of the mountain. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and in the other F-15E Twister 5-1, the pilot had come from A-10s, so he knew how to shoot at the ground targets. Okay, but the problem is, and some of you may know this, the F-15E was made for air-to-air, not air-to-ground. So the gun points up 2 degrees. So you really got to put your nose down more to shoot at ground targets. And it's just unnatural, but Junior, who was the pilot in the lead F-15E, had come from A-10s and understood shooting at targets. Panzer didn't have that experience. So they're trying to talk them on and do all this kind of stuff. It's just a very unusual situation. And the F-15E at that time period had no close air support doctrine in any of its pubs. And now they're dropping within 100 meters of good guys. Spliff said it was the hairiest mission he'd ever been on. He says, when they were told to go home, he said literally he and Panzer didn't talk to each other, you know, being only like 6 feet apart from each other, for over an hour and a half on the way home. They just didn't say a word to each other. They were so frustrated and so worried about what was happening up there, knowing what was going on. And 2 F-16s came in right behind them, Class 7-1 and Class 7-2. Those 2 guys also won Silver Stars. But the F-16 is made for close air support, and they're made for shooting at ground targets. So it was a different kind of thing for them. The ground fac was a staff sergeant at the time. He's a major now. Said that whenever he smells pine trees now, it immediately takes his mind back up to the top of that mountain, because they were shooting, the bullets were hitting the pine trees in the bunkers where the Al-Qaeda guys were, and splitting them all up and tearing them all up, and he could smell pine. And so now whenever he smells pine, Gabe Brown is his name, says it immediately takes him back to the top of Roberts Ridge. Crazy. That was kind of a long answer text to your short question. But, you know, that's how we do it. You typically, again, effectiveness over efficiency. We'll put a tanker somewhere that people can feed off of, so that they can have, we call it, like I said, a reliability tanker. And a lot of times, Tex, what we'll do is mid-mission, usually 3 hours, like I say, at about the hour and a half point, we'll have another KC-135 go up and fill it up, put 80,000 pounds back in it.
So what's the point of doing that versus just having the tankers flip spots?
The difference is because of the way the KC-10's configured.
Oh,
you can air refuel it. It's got the basket and it's got the boom, so it can do everybody. That's why we use it. And the KC-46 Tex will be doing the same thing. Okay, because it's configured the same way. So it will, and its engines are more efficient than the KC-10. KC-10, rule of thumb is it burns 20,000 pounds an hour. That's how we did the mission planning for the KC-10. We knew that it was going to burn 20,000 pounds an hour. So if it's up for 5 hours, it burns 100,000 pounds. You know, it just makes the math easy. And okay, I'm a poli-sci major. All right, I had to have 1 algebra class to graduate. So I am not a mathematician. Okay, but even I can figure out, 20,000 pounds an hour times 5, all right, in my little tanker brain, all right. And for a long time, Tex, I had all the burn rates of the F-15E, the F-15C, the F-18, the F-14, and I had to, because that was my life. Tanker math was my life, and I am not a mathematician.
Like for us, typically, the missions we do will be somewhere in the 3-hour range.
Yeah.
Typically, we're all taking off about the same time, all landing about the same time. Maybe 20, 25 aircraft.
Yeah.
So what would, and I think for us, the efficiency is probably a little more important than the effectiveness.
Yeah.
So like, what would be your recommendation for tankers to support that many aircraft to be able to refuel as quickly as possible? And in the game, we kind of have unlimited resources, so we could stick as many up there as we wanted to. But realistically, what would you do in real life?
8 to 1, 8 receivers to 1 tanker.
Gotcha.
Right, that's the actual rule text right now. Okay, KC-135 can't have more than 8 receivers on the wings, and that makes it really manageable. All right, so if you have 26 airplanes going up, then you're going to have at least 3 tankers. All right, and the planning factors, text, you got to think of too is you can have 1 million pounds in the air, but if it's only going through 1 tube, for 26 airplanes, you ain't going to make it. All right, and so it's always, air refueling is always about contact points, and by contact points I mean airplanes able to plug into someplace, get gas. All right, the nozzle, the basket, whatever you want to call it, that's a contact point. And so with the 26 plane alpha packages that we were doing in Iraq, both in Desert Storm and in the invasion, the shock and awe campaign, again, it was about contact points, because the alpha packages were 26 to 28 planes. So we would fly 3 KC-10s, all of them with warp pods. And the limiting airplane was always, always, always the Hornet. Super Hornet has a little bit better legs, not much better, but a little bit better. Okay. The 14 could go for a long time. The A6B could go for a long time.
We are painfully aware. Half of us fly the Tomcat A and B, and half of us fly the Hornet Charlie.
So you know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay. So a Hornet Charlie is probably going to have to refuel about every 25 to 30 minutes. Again, that was our rule of thumb. It was about every 25 to 30 minutes, depending on what it was doing. If it was running around low level at tactical speeds, then you're probably going to be 20 to 25 minutes instead of 25 to 30. It all depends on, again, what you're doing. If you're in a rescue type of situation, then it's probably going to be about every 20 minutes, because you're burning a lot of gas, because you're spending a lot of time looking for the survivor on the ground. That's why rest caps are so fuel intensive, is because you spend a lot of time figuring out what the situation is. How many survivors are there? If it was a Hornet Charlie, then there's 1 survivor. If it's a Tomcat B or D, then there's 2 guys. And it all depends on how fast the airplane was going when they got out. They could be miles apart. One of them could be injured. One of them's radio is busted. Oh, I hated that one. Guy's radio was broken. Couldn't talk to anybody. Took us a while to find him.
What about offload? Was there maximums that each aircraft was allowed? Was that set per mission, or kind of who determined that?
So again, Tex, a really good rule of thumb. An R model over about a 3-hour period, about 90,000 pounds. Okay. A KC-10 over a 3-hour period, probably about 120 range. All right. I'd use 120 because that just makes the math easy.
Right.
All right.
But like the aircraft taking the gas.
It literally depends on the receiver and what the receiver's doing. For instance, here's a really good example, Tex. the F4G Wild Weasels in Desert Storm, the F-16 Wild Weasels in Iraqi Freedom would often be tasked to escort 2, maybe 3 packages, okay? Depending on if they had harm missiles, if they had shot their wad or gone Winchester. They would typically cover maybe 2 to 3 packages going in. So the Weasels were taking more gas than, say, the F-16 bomb droppers, because they were just going in, dropping their bombs, coming out. And during the war in Kosovo, the lieutenant colonel, squadron commander, she was from my base at Fairchild. She didn't understand that. She came up to me one day and goes, "Mark, I don't understand this. I don't understand this. How come these guys are getting more gas than these guys?" And I had to explain to her, well, the Weasels are going in, going out. You know, go in, do their thing, come back out, refuel, go back in, cover another one, come back out. You know, was where the bomb droppers are going in, doing their business and coming out. So, Tex, you have to think of it in that point, in that standpoint too, because your Weasel guys or your CD guys may cover 2 packages at once. It sounds like you guys are all going in at one time, or fairly close. Your TOTs are fairly grouped together. Try it sometime where you have one package go in, another package go in, just for giggles to see what happens. Okay.
Sure. We're actually talking about doing that because we've got a lot of guys that fly on the West Coast and some on the East Coast, and just sometimes the time difference makes it tough. So we're thinking about running some missions where the first package of the East Coast guys come in, and then the West Coast guys would come in, you know, an hour or 2 later and run a second part of that mission. So
yeah, and maybe it's you know, a scenario like what's a good scenario? Say the first package goes in and hits strategic targets, and the second package is coming in and hitting like close air support and taking out, you know, ground targets or something like that. That's one way to do it. You're still going to need air to air. You're still going to need CD, okay? But your bomb droppers are configured completely different. Does that make sense? You know, some will have 2,000-pound JDAMs. JASM, the new Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile. That's another one that you could do, you know, and going after strategic targets. Or you can have like this big integrated air defense takedown for the East Coast guys, and then the West Coast guys go in and take out the strategic targets or some ground targets, you know, like a truck convoy or something like that. Maybe that's a way to do it too. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
That would be a cool scenario.
We actually recently did something like what you just described with our sister wing, the Joint Task Force 501, with F-16s and A-10s. So we were all in Navy jets, and they were in you know, in the slow flyers and the F-16s. Except we all went in together, and then the A-10s would just have to circle around, wait for ages. So that's when the idea, you know, kind of came in, where we should really stagger this. Rather than have people loiter for 2 hours without dropping a single thing and then, you know, coming in.
Yeah. And that's a fairly realistic scenario too, Mike, is where, you know, you have a big package go in and, you know, basically kick down the door, and then the next package goes in a couple hours later and hits like leadership targets or a convoy or petroleum oil lubricants targets or something like that. That's very realistic. That's good training too, because, you know, one week, you know, like Tuesday night, one group is the goes in and does their thing, and then the next night, you know, the next group, you know, you switch roles, or you switch targets.
Sounds good. I had a question with regards to the refueling that you were just talking about a second ago.
Yes.
As the tanker pilot, do you have access to the gas that you're offloading for your own use as well, or is it completely separate?
Great question, Mike. I use all the gas in the tanks. All the tanks feed to each other. They all drain. The wing tanks drain into the forward and aft body tanks, and the center wing tank drains into the forward tank. We are burning the same gas that we are also going to offload. All right. So what that becomes is a real mental gymnastics of draining the gas forward and draining it out of the wings. And the KC-135 has 2 reserve tanks, 1 in each wingtip. And typically we leave those full unless we really need it. So yes, we are burning the same gas that we are offloading. And a good tanker crew, there's actually a formula that we had, Mike, that all of us knew and memorized, okay? So that we could maintain the center of gravity, all right? And remember I told you I'm not a math whiz, all right? The best indicator is actually watching the trim indicator, okay? If the trim indicator doesn't move or only moves like a half a unit forward or half a unit back, then I know that my CG is good, all right? But, sometimes when we were doing big offloads, like in B-52s, where you're draining and pumping like crazy, you had to run that thing through your head. And, I've long forgotten it, it's like 1/3 of the forward tank plus through the center body plus 2/3 of the aft body, and you add 2 if the reserves were full, and you take away 2 if the reserves were empty. So I think that's what it was. All right. And you just had to run that thing through your head. All right. If you were lazy like me, you just looked down at the trim indicator and just made sure it only went like a half unit backward and forward. All right.
And so would this be now sort of automated in the newest sort of refits of the avionics, or is that always manual?
In the 135, it's always manual. There wasn't anything that did that for you, okay? And the tanker crews just, lived by that formula. In the KC-46, it's supposedly, all done automatically. And the KC-10, the flight engineer does it. The pilots don't have to worry about it. So, there you have it. The newer KC-46, it's all, the CG is all handled by computer.
So here's kind of a interesting / possibly difficult question.
Sure.
Did you ever get to the point where you dropped in gas far enough that it was time for you to return to base, but you hadn't given your receivers enough gas for them to complete their mission?
There was times when I gave away too much gas and had to land at some other base than my home. I never had the situation you're talking about, but I've always had to give off more gas in certain situations. You want to hear a funny story? This is a really funny story. So, opening of Afghanistan, you have B-52s and B-1s coming from Diego Garcia, all right? All of you know where Diego Garcia is, about 6 south, okay? Wolf, you may have been there, okay? It's actually kind of a cool place. It's actually a really pretty place. It's got this massive runway, though. It's got a 12,000-foot freaking runway, all right? And then it's got a lagoon full of Army pre-position ships, okay? Well, what happened is a KC-10 took off, and it was going up to refuel a B-52 that was coming back from Afghanistan. And typically, they never took the 80,000 pounds. They'd always take, I only need 30 to get home, so you had an extra 50,000 pounds. Well, what happened was one of the guys going to Afghanistan, his KC-10 broke hard broke. So what happened is they had to wait like 45 minutes, again, burning 20,000 pounds an hour. And the B-52 needed the whole 80,000 pounds. Well, they weren't going to make it back to Diego Garcia because it was a 3-hour ride. It's a 3-hour en route from the tanker track was called El Dorado back to Diego Garcia. You know what they did? They landed in the Maldives. They put the KC-10 down on that runway in the Maldives. Okay. It's about 9,000 feet long, Wolf. So they're pretty much empty. So their landing rollout wasn't that bad. All right. But this KC-10 shows up in the Maldives. And those of you who know or do any scuba diving know the Maldives is like one of the world's greatest places
So it's amazing.
it's scuba. But Mike, have you been there?
No, I haven't had the chance, but I know what you're talking about.
It's incredible. Okay, so imagine this. Okay, you're the airfield manager in the Maldives, and you see a AMC Gray KC-10 come in and land. All right, the KC-10 crew are like going, well, we're here, and they're like looking around, and sure enough, a follow me truck comes out and goes, okay, guys, follow me, and they take them to some parking pad and put them down there, okay, and the crew gets out and they go, hey, we're really sorry we had to do this. You knew this was one of our divert bases. We had to divert, and here we are. We need 320,000 pounds of gas on the airplane so we can go fly tomorrow. But we need a place to sleep. And the airfield manager goes, are you on the government's dime? And they all go, well, yeah, it's contingency and everything. And the airfield manager goes, I've got just the place for you. He took them to one of those dive bungalow places in the water taxi, okay? And so the crew ends up going to, and they've each got their own little bungalow, okay? You know, sucks not having your wife there with you, but here they are, all right? So they get in the water taxi, go to one of these really famous hotels. The hotel goes, oh, Air Force, we'll take care of you guys. They feed them like out the wazoo, okay? The next day, they get on the phone and they call back to Diego Garcia, okay, you know, here we are, we got the airplane, you know, reloaded back up. You got a mission for us? Yeah, we got a mission for you. And the pilot from the back goes, by the way, we've been granted political asylum. Come get the jet. Because they were being so well taken care of. Anyway, the commander, of course, said, get your butts back on the airplane and come back home. Okay.
Amazing story. Amazing
We're
story.
not
Thank
leaving
you.
you there. We're not leaving you guys there. So they go up, they refuel another B-52 going into Afghanistan, give it like 80,000 pounds. And then they turn around and they made it back. But those guys had the best divert story for operations in Afghanistan, landing in the Maldives.
So basically what you're saying is always mission first, right?
Always mission first, but if you happen to, it's always going to be mission first, okay? But believe me, there was a long discussion in that cockpit going, should we or shouldn't we? And when the B-52 took all the gas, it was a moot point. We got to land. We're not going to make it back to Diego. We have to land somewhere. And the Maldives was one of our primary divert bases, okay? You know where the other one was? The Seychelles.
Oh,
the Seychelles Islands. Yeah, like where they do the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue. Yeah, that place. That was the other place, okay? That was the other place that was a divert base. So you had the Maldives or the Seychelles, all right?
Tough choice.
Yeah, really, really tough choice, okay?
Like I should have joined the Air Force.
Huh?
This sounds like I should have joined the Air Force instead of the Navy.
Well, that was the interesting thing about being at Diego, Billy, was it's a Navy base, okay? As you well know, all right? And so they still had patrol airplanes that were coming in and out of there. But for the most part, you know, the Air Force had taken over. And the British Indian Ocean Territories folks, you know, were taking pretty good care of us. And there was one other thing really weird about Diego Garcia. Billy, have you been there?
I have not. I was a West Coast.
Okay. The really odd thing about the British Indian Ocean Territories, or Diego Garcia, is the Queen's chickens. There are chickens everywhere in that island. Literally chickens running everywhere. It used to be a penal colony. And the prisoners would raise chickens. And that place is overrun by chickens. And I was down there during the time period where all the eggs were hatching, all the chicks were hatching. And what was really interesting was to see a mother hen and her 10 chicks, and 3 days later there was only 9. Okay, and then 5 days later there was only 8. You know, and they would burrow underneath the building barracks, and they'd live under there. Okay, and we were told you're not allowed to feed them. There actually was a pretty stiff fine, like $100 for if you were caught feeding the queen's chickens. You're just not to mess with them. Okay. Well, all of you know what happened on Guam with that brown tree snake. A 747 came in from Guam, and some folks that had been partying real hard the night before saw something slither off into the trees after the 747 landed. It was bringing in B-52 tires. That set the whole island off. The Americans actually had to pay for, they actually hunt the brown tree snake with dogs, a beagle. And they brought a beagle and its handler over to go find that snake, because this hungover guy said, well, I think it was a female and I think it was pregnant. The Indian, the Diego British guys were not happy. But after 7 days, that beagle couldn't find a trace of that thing. So they sent the beagle and the handler home.
The Hawaiian Islands still don't have any snakes.
Really?
To this day. Yeah.
So Wolf, I asked him, I said, so what do you do when you find a snake? And he says, the dog eats it. I said, what? He says, no. He says, it's a snacko for the dog. You let the dog take it. Which I thought was pretty funny. So anyway.
Fajita, you're on mute if you're trying to talk.
I was just going to make a joke about the Hawaiian Islands and their mongoose problem and your comment about the snakes, but it's just a joke.
So do tanker pilots qualify in a single airframe, or do they fly all the airframes? And like, how many hours do you accumulate over a career? Some of these fighter jocks we talk to get 2,000 hours. It sounds like some of you guys do that in a year.
My best year was about 900. So yeah, we get a lot of extra hours. Okay. And Billy, that's a great question, because the tankers fly so much. I ended my career with just a little over 3,700 hours flying time in the KC-135. Okay, you know, the FAA, you had sim time too, so I had another like 2,500 of sim time too. So it was, you know, so it was over like 5,000 hours. But here's the really cool thing: I had a very unusual career. I've got 3 rides in an F-15. A ride in an S3 Viking, 2 rides in a VC-10, British VC-10, C-130, AWACS, NATO AWACS. I have a lot of time in a lot of different airplanes. I had a really robust career flying in all these different planes. I flew with the British VC-10 guys in Operation Northern Watch out of Incirlik, Turkey. Those guys were a kick, man.
So you just fly one airframe, and you don't fly 10s, and they don't fly.
No, I only flew 135s. You know, I never got in the seat of a KC-10.
Cool, man.
I only had one KC-10 mission, you know, and that was during Desert Storm. Our airplane broke. I wasn't going to come in and not fly. So this flight engineer, you know, said, hey, come hop on with us. He'd flown with us the week before. He'd never been in a KC-135 as a flight engineer, so he hopped on with us. And when we broke that day, I got back up into ops, and he said, hey, just come with us. So I did, again with my camera. Took a lot of pictures. We were refueling the F-15 caps along the border of Iraq and Saudi Arabia. So, you know, I've had the opportunity to fly in all these different airplanes, which is very unusual, particularly, you know, an S3 Viking. But it was up doing refueling missions, Billy. It was refueling the F-18 cap over the John F. Kennedy And then when we were done with that, they were running around tagging ships in and around the aircraft carrier. Because as you know, ships come in and go out of the area around the carrier, and they have to know who it is and what they're doing. And so we spent about an hour, running from ship to ship to ship to ship, to see who they were registered to, and came back in and landed. It's a 2.2-hour mission. So.
In any of those F-15 rides, did you ever get to be on the other end of the aerial refueling and see it from the boom side?
Yeah. Hang on. I'll see if I can figure out how to get this picture in here while I'm talking to you guys. But yeah, I've got some great pictures of me in the back seat. Matter of fact, my last F-15 ride was with a guy by the name of Ken Cruiser Wilsbach. And he is now the Pacific Air Force's 4-star general. So it was fun flying with him, but he darn near put my lights out. He pulled 8.2 Gs and told me right before he did it, hang on, Sluggo, and went right to 8.2. I saw about that much of the back of his seat. Dude, I thought I was going to go out. So, all right, I'm trying to figure out how to put this picture up here. Maybe I just got to dump it in your box. Google Drive, Dropbox. No, your computer yet. Let me see if I can. I'll put a picture here in the chat that you guys can see what it looks like from outside my window, as well as where is it? So here's what it looks like from the F-15 looking at the tanker. Down here in the chat, you guys can open that picture up, and then I'll show you what it looks like coming up behind the tanker in the back seat of the F-15. If I can find the picture. Oh, here it is. This is what it looks like from the back seat. Can you guys open those? Can you see those?
Yep.
This is why I always have my camera with me. And then let me find one that shows you what it looks like. Here's a cool one. F4 coming up to the boom. This was over Korea when the Osan and Kunsan guys were still flying F4s. Let me go back and see if I can find there's one F-15 picture everybody loves that it shows it all kitted out. It's the F-15 is, hang on, it's right outside the wing, and it's all loaded air to air. Oh, here I am in another one, again in the F-15, looking down at the tanker. All right, let me find this other one. There's one I have where I'm looking out the window, and it had snowed that night. It had a blizzard in the Silosat Mountains of southeastern Turkey, and it was just an incredibly clear blue sky. Oh, there it is. And he's loaded with live missiles. You see that picture? He's carrying AMRAAMs, Sparrows, Sidewinders, and there's just a buttload of snow, brand new snow on the ground from a blizzard that they'd had the night before. Here's what it looks like doing the spy airplanes. That's the Cobra Ball. That's the one that we send out when they're collecting on foreign missile shots. Let me find one from the back seat of the F8 of the F-14, if I can find it. Here's what it looks like with the drogue, an F-14 on the drogue. That was during Desert Shield out over the Red Sea. There's a F-14 Rio from Desert Storm who had his camera with him everywhere he went. His name is Dave Parsons. His call sign is Hey Joe. And he took a bunch of pictures. The Intel guys were giving him rolls of film, and he was shooting them like crazy. And then he'd bring them back, and they would develop them for him. Hang on, let me go to another folder here real quick. Just so you can see what it looks like from the back seat of a Tomcat looking up at the drogue. Where are you? There you go.
These are great pictures. Thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, you're welcome.
Absolutely agreed. Some of those are just absolutely fantastic.
So here's one. Here's what it looks like from the backseat of a Tomcat. Looking, you can see the drogue on the side there. And Hey Joe took that one during a Desert Storm mission.
It's interesting that with the boom-mounted basket, there is like a hinge at the actual basket end. Is that something that's on the pod-mounted one as well, or is the pod-mounted one completely different?
Yeah, actually, Mike, it does have a knuckle. We call it the knuckle. Okay, the pod-mounted ones have the same kind of knuckle. It's not quite as big as the one you see there. Okay, and you know, Mike, how good the guys are when they refuel, because they'll actually move forward, and the hose will actually get a loop in it, and they'll lay it on the fuselage in front of the windscreen, and they'll keep it there like laying down like a snake. You know, they're just showing off. I'm trying to find another one. Here's a really good one you guys will enjoy that shows it again from the F-14 perspective, looking at the tanker. That one was what they call the bong caps. So during Desert Storm, late in the war in February, middle of February, we actually started sending tankers into Iraqi airspace. And you have to remember, we don't have any defensive capability on our airplanes, other than that we can like run away to another hemisphere because of all the gas we've got. And here's one of the KC-10 in the F-14s. So we would have F-14s. They're called the Bong caps after Dick Bong, the famous P-38 pilot. The F-15's cap was called the Cindy caps, and their whole job was just to cut off the fleeing Iraqi MiGs. And for the most part, it was pretty boring, but every once in a while, some of the MiGs would try to make it out, and it got really exciting. They had a MiG-23 that launched out of an airbase, and he was actually targeting the KC-10 and two of the F-15s kind of split off of the KC-10 and says, "Oh, we got to go. We'll be right back." And they didn't like tell the KC-10 what they were doing, you know. And they went and shot down the MiG-23, and then all of a sudden the AWACS came up and says, "Oh, by the way, we needed you guys to come south. There was a MiG-23 that was launching, that was coming your way." And they're like thinking, "Wait a minute, if we were going south, we were going toward the MiG, right?" "Yeah, sorry about that, but you know, that's the only thing we can think of." You know, and the F-15 guys are of course shaking their heads going, "You morons." You know, but anyway, here's a picture to show you what Dave Parsons did with our gas. He's chasing an A6, low level, over Saudi Arabia. That's what they did with our gas. They went and played. When they came back from their missions over Iraq, sometimes they'd have extra gas, so they would go, you know, do some things down low or whatever. Anyway.
And what appears to be a very fast pickup in their trail as well.
You know what he said going over the top of those things? He said he went over the top of that, Mike. There was two people in the truck, and the A6 guy was screaming over the radio, "There's a truck, there's a truck, there's a truck." And the bombardier navigator in the A6 says, "Let's go fly over the top of it really low." And that's exactly what they did. And they said that the two guys that were in the truck, I guess, saw him coming, okay? And as they got closer and closer and closer, the doors flung open, and those guys came flying out of the truck like into the sand because they thought they were going to be blasted by these guys. Here's a really good picture of a cat shot. This guy, again, this is Hajo and his pilot. His pilot was named Jim Q, and Dog was his call sign. So,
I got a few more questions for you.
Any other questions?
I got a few more questions for my stream for you.
Okay.
First question is, what's the most crowded airspace you've flown in? And then, were you ever stacked with other tankers? And any close calls with other jets?
Jeez. How much time do we got? All right. The first one. Crowded was the Adriatic during Allied Force. We had near mid-airs almost every night. Literally almost every night. Hey, I'm going to put a picture up here. I'm going to explain to you here when I get done answering your question. That's really going to help you guys out. All right. Do y'all see that picture? It's called hose multiplier. Did y'all get it? Okay. I'll explain it here in just a minute. All right. So really crowded airspace. Saudi Arabia was fairly crowded, but nothing like the Adriatic. And literally, Creighton, we were having near mid-airs almost every night. Okay. I went out and flew one mission one night during the shock and awe campaign, because, you know, here's this whole big plan that I've created, my team has created, and I'm doing it from a desk inside basically a bank vault. And I finally said, I got to go out and see what I've created here. And I hopped on with a tanker crew from my squadron back at Spokane and Fairchild and flew that night with him. His name was Jason Glover. His call sign's G-Love. Monique was his co-pilot. I can't remember his boom. But I had to go up and just see what it was like. And while we were flying out to the area we were going to, we were going out to an air refueling anchor area over the Anbar province where they were shooting Scuds from. That was the area that all the Scuds would be shot from. We had a 2-ship of F-15E Strike Eagles go under us 300 feet going into Iraq. And I still to this day don't know if they saw us, because we certainly didn't see them, but I heard them go underneath us. That's how close they were. And I mean, I've got a headset on like this, and I can hear them go underneath us. All right, and that was pretty scary. We make our living getting close to other airplanes, though, Creighton. So, you know, that kind of thing didn't bother me so much until those two F-15s without their lights on went underneath us, and we could hear them. I had one other close experience with another F-15 that had come off another tanker, and he was actually looking the other direction and went right over the top of us, and I could hear his engines too. That was a little scary, but you know, for the most part. What was the third portion? The third part?
Let's see.
Third question?
Let's see. Crowded airspace. Were you ever stacked with other tankers?
I can't hear you.
You're muted.
Were you ever stacked with other tankers?
Yes. Typically, Desert Storm, we were flying as 5 ships. So there's 5 KC-135s. We are stacked up 500 feet and a mile nose to tail. And that's a lot of airplanes. And matter of fact, I'll tell you a very interesting mission we had one night. We were fueling F-111s out of Taif that were going into Iraq in Desert Storm. And they were loaded with 4 bunker buster laser guided bombs, each one of them. So there's 20 F-111s, 4 on each tanker. And I was leading this 5 ship, and as I kind of sped up because the mission commander says, hey, we're late. So I was kind of speeding up, and I didn't realize when I sped up that there was another 5 ship in front of me, below me. So we actually became a 10 ship of tankers with 40 F-111s. All of them loaded with 4 laser guided bombs. Okay, so what's that, 160 bombs? All right, all of them going up into Iraq. So the breakup of a 10 ship is pretty wild. So we get to the end of the refueling track, and we all start breaking off this way, you know, and we all came back as this big tanker 10 ship. I mean, we had taken spacing, so we're like 5 miles apart and everything. But here's 10 tankers coming back to the base all at one time. It made for a very interesting landing sequence. Fortunately, we had 3 runways at Jeddah, and the A models, which I was flying at the time, would land on the center and the right. And we had a VFR recovery that worked really slick. You did it even at night. You do it by, you know, the Mark 1 eyeball. We had little ground things that we'd look at. You know, there was an intersection where we made our turn to the south. We would turn base to final over this radar dome. You know, we had all these ground references that we could do it off of. But we could actually land on a lot of airplanes really fast that way. I think one day we got 26 tankers on the ground, and we did it under 10 minutes. Yeah, that's a lot of tankers. and we went right to refueling pits, and they filled us back up with, we were flying with 165 fuel loads, wet. So they put fuel and water because we were burning water at the time in the old A models. And a good fuels crew could load a tanker back up, put water on it in about 35 minutes. They were doing it really fast. Their book said it'd take 2 hours, and they were doing it in 35 minutes. It was really something to watch. Okay, the hose multiplier picture.
What's the vantage point on it? What's the surface in the near field on the left, bottom left? On that picture.
In the picture? Hang on. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Like a Tomcat.
Yeah, I think it's a Tomcat
that's the
intake.
Tomcat intake.
Thought so.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's the Tomcat intake. So this is again my buddy Parsons. Okay, so one of the issues we had was we couldn't refuel the big Navy packages in Desert Storm with 26 airplanes and 5 tankers. So one of the Navy A6 guys came up with this idea of what they called hose multiplier. And you see the A6, actually it's a KA6D here on the tanker's wing. And remember, I talked to you guys about contact points. This is where contact points became very, very critical to us, because you had to get that gas offloaded into the other airplanes quickly. And the only way we could do that before we got to the border of Saudi Arabia and Iraq was by having these A6s or KA6s on our wing. And this proved to be worth its weight in gold, because we could refuel these big 26 plane alpha packages fairly quickly, get everybody across the basket. And again, particularly the C model Hornets, get them across the baskets and get them filled up before we got to the border. The Tomcats would come up and take like 3,000 pounds, which is how much it took them to like launch and get up to altitude. The EA-6Bs was about the same, but the Hornets were just plugging in one right after the other, because you'd have, 4 to 8 Tomcats, 2 EA-6Bs, and then you'd have like 20 Hornets. Or in Desert Storm's case, you'd have Hornets and A7s, because the John F. Kennedy had 2 A7 squadrons that were flying. And that was the only way we could refuel all these guys fast enough. Now, during Iraqi freedom, we did exactly the same thing. We had hose multipliers, but it was Super Hornets. And I remember this carrier captain came up to me in the command center and says, "Hey, we want to explore all the missions of the Super Hornet. One of them is tanking." And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, it's now the new organic tanker. The S3 Vikings are going to go away, and the Super Hornet's going to be the airborne tanker." And I said, "Man, have I got a deal for you." Okay. And what I did was I would put the Super Hornets with the tankers. The reason being is they don't lose their air-to-air capability. So they would launch with air-to-air missiles to defend the tankers and act as a tanker at the same time. It worked out really well. Remember, I told you effectiveness and efficiency. And this was a very effective way to do this, okay? But some air traffic control guy just went bonkers about Super Hornets hanging on the wings of the tankers offloading gas. "You guys can't do that. There's going to be a midair. We do this for a living, for crying out loud. What are you talking about?" All right. And this colonel was just apoplectic about this. So we had to separate the tanker cell from the Super Hornet cell by 4,000 feet. And I said, "Colonel, you're kidding me, right? I mean, we did this in Desert Storm. This isn't Desert Storm." Yeah, we're using a much more capable airplane now, for crying out loud. But he would not get off that rock. So we ended up having to put the Super Hornets down below us a couple thousand feet. Okay. We cheated. We did it 2,000 anyway. Okay. And it worked out perfect, because we were worried about the MiG-25s, the Iraqi MiG-25s. About a week before Iraqi freedom started, one of their high-time MiG-25 pilots, he's a brigadier general. He's the guy that shot down the F-18 Hornet in the first Gulf War. He shot down Scott Spiker. His name is Daoud Zuhair. Okay, and he was the brigadier general, and I think he was the Al Assad wing commander. And a week before Iraqi freedom, he got in his Foxbat, went up to like 60,000 feet, and came screaming at the border at 1,245 knots. Scared the crap out of all of us, because I mean he's going faster. He's going twice as fast as a 30-06 bullet, and he goes right to the border, and about 2 miles from the border, he goes into this big Hayaka turn, and literally goes down the Iraqi border, inside Iraqi airspace, and then lands up at Balad. Scared the crap out of all of us. Okay, so now we're thinking, crap, we got all these tankers that are going to be right up next to the border. what's going to happen if Zuhair takes off and does one of these, high fast flyer, high Aka things. And all the Tomcat guys go, please make him do it. Please let him do it. We'd love to see this happen. Because they're all like going, man, we have got the missile for him. Okay. And that's, of course, is the Phoenix. Okay. And they're all the Tomcat guys are like going, dude, have we got a solution for his problem? Okay. We'll send him to Allah right now. Hopefully that didn't offend anybody. But, they've got the Tomcats got the Phoenix missile, which is a perfect missile for a high fast flyer. Anyway, so now we had the Super Hornets that were particularly over in the Gulf protecting the tankers for us. And all the Super Hornet guys were really happy too, because they just punch off the tanks and then go slap down the MiG if it came up and it did anything to the tankers. So that's how we did it. Again, you have to look at, here's the airplanes and the assets that I have. How am I going to use them? How's the best way to use them? And here's something that you might think of, Mike, for your F-14s. A lot of the F-14s did what they call self-escort. So they would load a Phoenix on the left wing glove, a Sparrow in the tunnel, 2 JDAMs up front, and of course you got the 2 Sidewinders in the Lantern pod. So they could actually self-escort their way in to a target. We didn't have to put F-15s with them or any of that kind of stuff. And of course their radar had, all the bells and whistles that the F-15s had for doing IFF interrogation, all that kind of stuff. So they had a missile to take on the high fast flyer. They had the Sparrow and the Sidewinders to take on anybody else, and they were carrying bombs. So that's something you can think about too. Is the Tomcats going into the target area loaded for self-escort. They don't do that now, but the Super Hornets don't do that now. They're usually just wall-to-wall air-to-ground weapons. So, but for a Super Hornet C deed load, if anybody's flying a Super Hornet, one of the really cool loads, again, I'm a model builder, a plastic model builder like Creighton is they were carrying 3 harms and a JSOW, joint standoff weapon. And the Hornets in the north, the Legacy Hornets in the north, were 2 harms and a JSOW. And that was a really, really good C deed load for them that they used a lot too. They really loved the JSOW because it's got a 1,000-pound warhead, it's got a cluster warhead, and then it's got the super secret warhead for taking down power stations and stuff like that. Right? It was full of aluminum foil. Okay. It just it would go over a power station and just belch out aluminum foil and chaff, and the power station just shorts out. All right, guys. Anything else? Man, you've got to see pictures tonight. All kinds of crazy war stories. And believe me, I could talk more war stories. Some of them really funny. My first. Those of you go buy my book, Tanker Pilot. My first mission when I arrived for Desert Shield, Royal Saudi Air Force F-15 breaks our nozzle right off, takes it right off the airplane. And I've got a picture in the book of the nozzle sitting in his receptacle. Stallion 6-1. Gas is pouring out of the back of our boom. We don't have all the pumps off yet. And gas is pouring out, and he's heard this big bang in his airplane. He comes back up for more gas, and we're telling him, dude, you've got the only way of giving you gas. He hadn't looked over his shoulder to see that our nozzle was in his receptacle. He goes over and he looks like this, looks back at us, and he kind of shoulders go down like this. And he goes, we make air mess, no? In a Saudi voice, a southern, a Saudi accent. Go, yep, sir, we did. We made an air mess. He goes, okay, I go home now. and he put that thing 90 degrees, and he was gone. 3 days later, that nozzle showed up at our base in our maintenance department, sitting on a table. I went in there, and there it was, sitting on the table. They had gone and pulled it out and sent it back to us like we were going to use it. He'd actually cracked the little flange that holds it to the boom, so it was toast. There wasn't anything to do with it. We had to send it back to the States. We got it back to the States, and they probably just put it on a shelf somewhere. Allied Force funny mission happened to the Canadians. A Canadian F-18. What do they call them? They call them a CF-18, CF-118 or something like that. This is a true story, I swear to you guys. He had 2 GBU-10 2,000-pound bombs on his wings. All right, he was going up and hitting some kind of barrage or something, wolf, and one of them didn't come off. One of them was a hung bomb. And he thought, no problem, I'll just go out and shake it off over the ocean. Well, the problem with that was the navies of 17 different coalition nations happened to be underneath it. And he was going to go shake this 2,000-pound bomb off. And so he was talking to AWACS, and of course, one of the ships was listening to the AWACS and heard him, well, I'm just going to go shake it off out over the ocean. And the ship guy goes, oh, hold it. All right. And they said, do you realize, Mr. Hornet Driver, Mr. Canadian Hornet Driver, the nation, like ships of 17 nations are down here? He goes, okay, where do you want me to go? And they go, hang on a second, let us coordinate this. So there was a particular area they were going to send it. But it happened to have one of our old Perry-class frigates that was in that area, that was cruising through that area. And Billy, you probably remember what a Perry-class frigate. They've long since gone. It's not a really big ship, but it was a U.S. Navy ship. And so they told it to make like a 30 left jog, and they said, okay, fine. And they go, well, like, what's happening? Well, we got a guy with a hung bomb. He's going to drop the bomb up here in front of you.
I don't know if the Stark was. I don't think the Stark was.
He's going to do what? Well, he's got a hung bomb. We got to get the bomb off the airplane. He goes, all right, we'll take the 30 left, but we need to resume course when you guys are done. He goes, okay, fine. So they go out there, and he shakes the airplane all up, and it finally comes off. And it does what bombs do, all right? Goes down, hits the water, boom! There's this great big, huge geyser of water out in front of it and everything like that. And the Perry-class frigate goes, okay, I can resume course now. So he takes his 30 cut back and goes resume course, okay? The captain of the ship calls the AWACS laughing. He can hardly get a sentence out. He's laughing so hard, okay? And he's telling the AWACS, tell the Hornet pilot, thank you. And the AWACS guys are going like, for what? He says, we're going to stop right here for about 30, 40 minutes. All right. All hands are on the deck right now. And that's when the AWACS goes, what's going on? Are you guys okay? He goes, we're fine. Okay. We're gigging up the thousands of fish Mr. Hornet pilot just killed for dinner tonight. Okay. And literally, they had all these guys, all these kids up on the deck with whatever they could find, plastic bags, everything, bringing fish up onto the deck, okay?
Yeah.
And they're going to have this big, huge fish fry, all right? So the AWACS calls the Hornet and goes, hey, I just want to let you know, the U.S. frigate sends their appreciation for dinner tonight. And of course the Hornet guy's like going, wait, what? And says, that bomb you dropped just roasted about 1,000 fish. That ship is now stopped, and they're bringing fish up onto the deck, so that they can hand them out to all the other boats that come along, and you share this kind of a thing, obviously. But I mean, it's like tuna and who knows what else, all really delicious fish, I'm sure. Okay, and Mike, I have no idea what kind of fish they got in the Adriatic, but apparently they're large, they're colorful, and they taste good. I don't know. So anyway, the Hornet gets back to Aviano and lands, and of course, the fish story beat them home. All right, and the crew chief of the Hornet has already made a stencil. All right, so they've got all these bomb marks like this. All right, going down the side of underneath the cockpit. Okay, and they paint a black salmon on the side of the airplane as the mission marking for the fish mission. That's what they called it, the fish mission. Okay. Now, I hear this story from the crew chief because I'm out there again. I've got my camera with me, and I'm looking at this, and I'm like, 500-pound bomb, 2,000-pound bomb, 2,000-pound bomb, 2,000-pound bomb, 500-pound bomb, 500-pound bomb, fish. And I go to the crew chief and I go, what's the story behind the fish? And he just starts rolling, man. He's just laughing like crazy. And he tells me that story about, they call it the fish mission. Okay, that's for the fish mission. I go, fish mission? And he told me this story. All right. But they said there were just thousands of fish dead on top of the water. Okay, so the story gets better. Billy, where are you? You still there, Billy? Data. Here's what happened. Okay, there was one ship they didn't coordinate with. The sub that was trailing its sonar. The bomb went off in the water and toasted the towed sonar on the sub. Okay, they were not happy. All right, the surface guys were all like going, "Woohoo, we got fish!" But the submarine, and I can't remember which one it was, but they had been trailing their sonar, their towed sonar, and I guess it really screwed it up when that bomb, hit the water and went down a little ways and went off. You being a submariner would understand that. Okay.
Yes, I could see where they'd be very upset.
Because I understand it roasted the towed sonar, and they had to actually go back into port somewhere, or like go down to SIG or something like that, and completely repair the towed sonar on the thing. So some guys were real happy, some guys not so happy. You guys have heard about bomb graffiti, right? We actually would write messages on the bombs. On the John F. Kennedy, we had a guy who was a rapper, and he called it Taliban rap. He would write rap music to the Taliban on the 2,000-pound bombs with a gold Sharpie. And I'm telling you, if he cleaned some of that up, he would probably be very, a very successful rapper. But the best thing I ever saw written on the side of a bomb was Saddam has won the coin toss and is elected to receive. Somebody wrote that on a bomb. So there was some really imaginative things people were putting, on the sides of the bombs, and they're drawing all kinds of pictures of camels and, all kinds of stuff. But the bomb graffiti got pretty interesting. And in every command center of every war I've ever been in, there's always a quote board of stupid things people say. And all of you that have been in the military know that somebody at some point in time has made their name famous by saying something really stupid in some meeting. Well, we captured all of that on what we called the quote board, okay? And our quote board had some really, really good ones. And a majority of them came from the guy who sat next to me during Operation Iraqi Freedom. His name is Herb Clayton. His call sign is Shrek because he looks just like Shrek. out of the movie. Okay, wonderful African American kid, but he missed his calling as a stand-up comedian. All right, and everything that came out of his mouth was always funny. And one day somebody did something really good for him, or did something good for us, did us a favor, and he like blurts out, "I'd walk through hell and gasoline drawers for that man," you know. And we're all just busting up and everything like that, you know. And I made the mistake of picking Herb to give the capabilities and limitation briefing and creating it for all the generals. All right. I had a temporary loss of situational awareness and gave the funny man the brief. General Mosley, the 3-star general in charge of the air campaign, saw me in the hallway and says, "Did you just listen to what Herb just gave?" And I went, "Oh no, what did I just do?" He says, "Sluggo, that is the funniest damn brief I've ever heard in my life." I said, "It's so good." General Mosley said, "It's so good. I'm bringing him back tonight to give it to the night crew." Okay. And I said, "Sir, tell me what he did." And he goes, "Sluggo, I don't know where you got Herb, all right? But he should be giving all of your briefings, okay? I enjoy your
Thanks for the
briefings,
follow
Sluggo,
there,
but
Elite.
it's just not as funny
Appreciate
as
it.
I'm sorry." I said, "Okay." What did he do? It was around Easter time that the war was starting. And we got in the mail, one of my guys got this really, really expensive aluminum foil wrap, painted aluminum foil Easter bunny, chocolate Easter bunnies, all right? And it was a big one too. I mean, this was a really expensive one from Boston. He was a reservist, an S3 reservist in Boston that was working for me. It did not make it through the mail to Saudi Arabia well. Its face was all like this. It had the ears, you know, were split like this. There was chocolate oozing through the aluminum foil and everything. It looked like hell. Okay. And that thing gave Herb an idea. And he called the briefing the chocolate bunny full of fuel briefing. And he started the briefing with a chocolate bunny with that international, you know, no chocolate bunny sign through it. And he starts the briefing. "Okay, listen up. All you people think we're the chocolate bunny full of fuel. Since you guys all think that we're the chocolate bunny full of fuel, I got to tell you what the chocolate bunny can and cannot do. First thing first, you have your solid chocolate bunny. The kind of chocolate bunny that you bite into and it leaves teeth marks, okay? And he's doing this in front of all these generals. Then you got your second chocolate bunny, okay? The chocolate bunny that is hollow. And then when you bite into, the chocolate breaks all up. It gets into the couch. And your mom spanks your butt, all this kind of stuff. Well, tankers are the same thing. You're going to have chocolate bunnies that aren't going to have a lot of gas. You're going to have chocolate bunnies that are full of gas. Go to the ones that are the full chocolate bunnies. And he's going through the whole thing like this. Then he goes over and he shows this beautiful fire truck, which is the KC-10, and Jed Clampett's truck, which is the KC-135. We're 60 years old, okay? And he's going through all the variations of that. General Mosley literally is almost in tears after he gives this brief. And they took that chocolate bunny that they gave to the S3 reservists one night while I was asleep. They put a hangman's noose around its neck and hung it over my desk. And so when you went up and people said, "Hey, where's the air refueling, chief of the air refueling control team?" They would say, "Go to the chocolate bunny." And the people would look at you like, "What?" They said, "Just go up there, just look at all the signs, and there's only one chocolate bunny hanging from the ceiling. That's where Sluggo is sitting." And people would come up to my desk and they go, "Holy smokes, they were right." Because there was this awful looking chocolate bunny with a hangman's noose hanging from the ceiling about 6 feet over my desk. And it was because of the chocolate bunny full of fuel brief that Herb had given to all the generals. All right, gentlemen. Any more questions? I've taken up a lot of your time and showed you a lot of pictures and sitting here in my rocking chair making you all seasick. Fajita, you got a comment?
I was just going to say thank you so much for taking the time to come and speak with us. This has been awesome.
It's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun. Hope you guys enjoy the pictures and the stories.
By the way, Sluggo, a little bit earlier in the chat before you started posting your pictures,
yeah,
Pale Horse posted a picture of the F-15 with the basket still attached to it that you mentioned earlier in your talk.
F-18.
Hang on, I'm opening it up right
Was
now.
it an F-18? It's
Yeah,
called
the Hornet.
Mishap PNG.
Yeah, it's opening right now. That's the one. That's the one. Okay, now you see the brown shirt there, and you see he's got a hold of that wire. That's what we call the slinky. Okay, because it looks like a slinky. See, it looks like a slinky. All right, you can't tell in this picture, but that's the wire wrapping that holds. You can see the thing sticking out of the basket. That goes into the hose, and that slinky wraps around the hose and holds it together. That slinky had come off, as you see, had gone up over the top of the Lex fence and was beating against the side of the airplane while this guy was flying the thing home. All right? He would have been a whole world of hurt if that slinky had gone under instead of over, because it would have gone into his engines. All right? That's the one really, really bad thing about this basket coming off, okay, that you see here, is that slinky. And that's what we call it. We call it the slinky. And you can see this guy, trying to unravel it and take that thing off. All right? And you can see the basket is not in good shape. So now that I see the picture, it was the slinky banging against the side of the fuselage that actually broke the canopy. It wasn't the basket itself. It was the slinky banging around that actually broke the canopy.
Well, it kind of looks like the edge of that Lex there's chewed up too.
Yeah, it was. Because again, the slinky is what's doing it to it, Tex. The slinky is beating that thing up, John, like you can't believe. He said the whole way home, he was afraid that slinky was going to come inside with him.
Yeah, that would have been a huge, huge fear. I mean, I can't even imagine. It would have ripped his head off.
Yeah.
Looking from what it just did to the canopy, it would have ripped his head off.
Oh, well, yeah. And you can see what it did to the canopy, And like I told you, he's like sweating from the waist down, and he was like just freezing from the waist up, because again, this happened like in February of 2002. Crazy.
And I sent one picture for you as well while you were sending us all the lovely photos. This is what we get in the game. It's the rendition of the refueling hose from the 135 MPRS.
Oh yeah. Oh, you can see along the F-18 edge of the thing there how all beat up it is.
Yeah, I just posted another picture of the same aircraft from a different angle.
147. Yeah, see, these guys were on the Stennis. VFA 147 is the Argonauts. They were on the Stennis, and you can see what it did to the canopy, man. I mean, they just took it right off. But that slinky, he said, went all the way down the side of the airplane and was just banging against the side of the airplane. And he was really worried when he landed, where that thing was going to go. What a mess. Gentlemen, anything else? Thank you.
For
letting me be part of your meeting tonight.
And thank you, sir, very much.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much. And
Thank you.
go fly and kill bad guys.
Appreciate your time.
No, I appreciate your questions and spending time with you guys. It's been a lot of fun. Geez, we've been talking for almost 2.5 hours. Is that right?
Yeah, it looks like it. Yeah, about that.
All right. You have any more questions in your chat or your stream? Did we get everybody?
I don't see any more questions. So yeah, it looks like we got everybody.
Okay.
From that end.
All right. Awesome, guys.
Thanks again, Mark.
All right. Enjoy the night.
Thanks
Enjoy
again.
the night. We'll see you guys. Have a good night.
See you guys.
Good night.
Hey, thanks, Mark.
You're welcome. Still there, buddy?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Thanks for the invite, man. That was a lot of fun.
Yes, sir.
Good
that was
questions too.
Yeah.
Good questions and you know, good stuff. You know, hopefully that'll help with your as you guys design your scenarios. Because man, like I said.